السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with our Islamic studies, durus, classes, where we are studying this concise text covering some of the basics and essential knowledge that every Muslim should be aware of, and also covering some additional sciences with the aim of exposing the student to various knowledge and various sciences of the deen or of the Islamic religious knowledge. And we are currently in the chapter of As-Salah, the chapter of As-Salah, and as we mentioned, that the book is arranged according to the pillars of Islam and Iman. So we completed the first pillar of Islam, which is the Shahadatain, believing testimony that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah. And that was a chapter. And the testimony that Muhammad is his servant and messenger, and that was another chapter under which we studied the Seerah in brief, and the Sunnah in brief, and so on, and the Hadith and so. And now we're in the chapter of Salah, which is the second pillar of Islam, and we completed some introduction with regards to the Salah, the legislation of the Salah, and the conditions of the Salah, the prerequisites of the Salah. And today, insha'Allah ta'ala, we're going to go into the types of actions and statements of the Salah. So today we're going to go into the actual Salah. Before we get into today's topic or class, a quick review regarding the conditions of the Salah. As we mentioned, the conditions of the Salah, the prerequisites of the Salah, they are those things that are necessary for the Salah to be valid before you even start to pray. There are those things that are necessary for the Salah to be valid before you even start to pray. And it's referring specifically to the 5 daily Salah. And some of those conditions, most of it also apply to any Salah that you're going to pray. So we have the Tahara, purity, right? And that's purity from 2 things, Hadath and Najasa, right? Hadath, which is a state of impurity, which is anything that necessitates wudu or ghusl. That's Hadath, right? So anything that causes you to have to make wudu, such as sleep, urine, or stool, or anything that exists from the place of urine and stool, and also eating camel's meat, losing consciousness, light sleep, all of those things necessitates from you wudu. And then you have those things that necessitates from you ghusl, like janaba, menstruation, and postnatal bleeding. Those things necessitates from you ghusl. And then you have purification from the najasa, physical impurities. Those things that are deemed by the religion to be impure, like urine and stool in general, blood, dead meat, dead animals that you cannot eat. All of those things are considered impure. Your clothing, your surrounding, meaning your prayer place, and your body must be clean from those things. For the prayer, for the Salah. That is the Tahara. And then you have, after that, is what we mentioned, Dukhul al-Waqt, the entering of the time. Right? The entering of the time, that's the condition for the salah to be valid. Now this is specifically for the 5 daily salah and also for the nawafil. Because for the 5 daily salah, it's specific times you have to pray them. In order for it to be valid, that time must enter. If you mistakenly pray before the time, the condition was not fulfilled. You have to repeat your salah. But if you mistakenly pray after the time, the condition has been fulfilled. Because the time entered, it came in, but you missed it. So the condition was fulfilled. You don't have to repeat this salah. So that's with regards to the entering of the time. As for the nawafil, there are certain nawafil, certain voluntary prayers that are for a specific time. So you have to pray it in those specific times. The sunnah for Fajr before Fajr, the 4 before Dhuhr, 2 after Dhuhr, and so on. The Duha, during the Duha period, the Witr, between Maghrib, between Aisha and Fajr, and so on. Those you have to pray them within the time, and then you have the general nawafil. You can just pray voluntary prayers any time of the day, except during the 3 forbidding time. The 3 forbidding time, which is from after Fajr to sunrise, during the Zawal, when the sun is at the zenith, meaning straight up in the middle, and after Asr to Maghrib. Those are the 3 forbidden times. Now you can break those 3 down into 5 if you separate the sunrise and the sunset from that period. That's with regards to the entering of the time. With regards to the najasa we mentioned, if you mistakenly pray with najasa, your salah is valid. Meaning you mistakenly pray and your place was dirty, or your clothing or your body had some najasa you didn't know, your salah is valid. If you realize during the salah and you can free yourself from that impurity without moving a lot, you free yourself and continue praying. So let's say you realize it's on your hat. You just take out your hat and throw it to the side. It's on your shoes, you take out your shoes. On your socks, you take out your socks. But if it's on your shirt or on your pants, then there's a lot of movement now, right? The person looking at you gonna not see that you're praying, right? It's gonna be you doing something else. You putting on clothes, you're changing your clothes, right? So in that case, you have to leave the salah, clean yourself, or change your clothing, and then enter back into the salah. But if you realize after the salah is valid. And then you have after dukhul al-waqt facing the qibla, which is a condition for all the salawat, right, in general, except for the traveler who is praying his voluntary prayer riding on an animal, right? Except for the traveler, there is one condition, praying his voluntary prayer. Second condition, riding on an animal. Right? In this time, you're in a car or in an airplane. Those 3 conditions, you can deliberately, without a reason, pray your voluntary prayer not facing the Qibla. Right? So let's say, now the driver today can't do that. Right? Unless it's what do you call it? Where it says self-drive? Where's the word for it? Self-drive. Right? Then maybe, if it's legal. Right? But if it's not legal, then you can't. But before, they had self-driving vehicles. Right? And you don't have to worry. They see anything coming. Right? They see a ditch, they see a hole, they see what do you call it? A predator or something, anything they can see. Self-drive and a lot more features. So if you on a camel, right, any direction it faces, or if you're the passenger, any direction it faces, it doesn't harm, right? And those are the 3 conditions. Traveling, so you can't do it when you're home, right? Not when you go into work and coming back from work in the bus or in the train. You want to do nawafil salawat, and you are on the riding animal or in the vehicle, and it's a voluntary prayer. As for the obligatory prayer, you have to come out and pray your salawat, unless it's a case of necessity like airplanes, where you don't have any choice in most of the cases. That's with regards to facing the Qibla. The person who knowingly face other than the Qibla, definitely they have to repeat the Salah. If they mistakenly face other than the Qibla and they are in a residence, they have to repeat their Salah. But if they are traveling and they try their best to figure out the Qibla and then it turned out to be a mistake, their Salah is valid. And then you have the intention, which is also a condition of the Salah. Meaning you have to be conscious of which Salah you're praying. Right? And that's very simple. When you come to the masjid, sunset time, you already have your intention that is going to be Maghrib. So that's a quick overview. Now, at the end of the class, remind me for this benefit, right? Is the intention, how is the intention a condition? Right? How is the intention a condition? Because what's the meaning of a condition? Prerequisite, right? Something got to be in place. Now the intention, if you say the intention is a prerequisite, right? Does it have to remain with you, that prerequisite? It has the prerequisite, so the default is supposed to remain with you. You make wudu, the wudu remain with you. Right? So you're conscious of your intention, enter into the masjid. Just before you say Allahu Akbar, you're not conscious of the intention. What happened there? It didn't remain with you. Right? We're gonna, at the end of the class when we're done. So we don't want to divert too much from the nature of the class, inshallah. So the next chapter, as you mentioned, the actions of the salah. The actions of the salah. Now everything in the salah that you say from Allahu Akbar and you do from the Allahu Akbar to the end of the salah, they are categorized into three categories. Three categories. Now, some of these things, they are difference of opinion. There's not the class for. We're going to mention certain things for certain important benefits. Right? But we're not going to get into every detail with regards to that. And it's sufficient for the follower, the general servant, the general worshipper, to follow the view of a well-known scholar, right, concerning the matter of his deen. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ask the people of knowledge if you do not know, right? And you ask the people of knowledge concerning your salah, what's mandatory, what's recommended, and so on. And you follow that. And we basing these here base primarily of the Hanbali madhab, right, which is the general madhab of the scholars that most of us take our knowledge from, because most of us we study in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia and Egypt, right, and most of them, their principles in general goes back to the Hanbali madhab. Not all of them, right? Most of them, especially if you're studying Saudi Arabia, right? The principles generally go back to the Hanbali madhab. But that scholar, a specific scholar, he may see other views from the Shafi'is or the Hanafis and so to be most correct, right? That's a specific scholar. So for example, Sheikh Hussein or Sheikh bin Baz, right? Or Sheikh Abdul Salam, Al-Shuway'ir, that we mentioned, we mentioned a lot when we did Manhaj al-Salikin. They may see other certain views to be specific. So if you follow them in whatever view they have, that's sufficient. So we're going to stick to the general Hanbali view and the view that is being chosen by most of those contemporary scholars that we just mentioned. And obviously, everyone, they have their reasoning. Now, don't get confused, as we mentioned in the beginning, when we did Manhaj al-Salikin. How did the Prophet ﷺ prayed is almost agreed upon. The things that they differ, did he do it or didn't do it? If you were to leave it off, your salah is still valid. But how did he pray? In general, they agree. What's the difference? The difference is, if you left this out, what you have to do. Right? So don't think that the religion is in confusion. No, the religion is not in confusion, and the scholars are not in confusion. Right? How did the Prophet ﷺ pray? Everyone agreed. He raised his hand and he said Allahu Akbar, and he put it on his chest or his belly area. Right? Agreed upon. Right? He reads Surah Al-Fatiha. Agreed upon. He read the dua before Al-Fatiha. Agreed upon. He read a surah after Al-Fatiha. Agreed upon. He went for ruku. Agreed upon. Say Subhana Rabbi Al-Azim. Agreed upon. Sami Allahu liman hamida. Agreed upon. The entire salah. Did he move his finger in tashahhud? Difference of opinion. Did he do it or not? If you do it or you don't do it, your salah is valid. Okay, it's not a lot of movement. If it happened to not be a sunnah, that's going to nullify your salah. And it's not obligatory that if you leave it off, that you're going to be leaving off something that is obligatory. Right? Did he put his hand above his navel, below his navel, or sometime above, sometime below? Anyone you do, they all agree your salah is valid. Right? Even if you were to leave your hand at the side, your salah is valid because you're leaving off something that is not mandatory. Right? So the salah is agreed upon. Now here we are going to study the ruling of these points, whether it's mandatory, obligatory, and so why? So that we can leave it off? No. Sometimes we may mistakenly leave them out or forget them. So we need to know what we have to do. Do we have to do sujood as-sahw or not? So that's where you have some difference of opinion. So nothing to be confused upon. And it is important to note, anytime you study in fiqh, and important, a lot of people, they don't mention that. They make it seem as if it's all difference of opinion, but that's not the case. So as we said, there are three categories, all the actions and statements, from the Allahu Akbar to Assalamu Alaikum, for the actions and the statements of this salah. It's either a pillar of the salah, an obligation of the salah, or a recommendation of the salah. Now the pillars and the obligations of the salah, they are both obligatory. Linguistically, you have to do them. You can't deliberately choose to leave them out. Now why these scholars separate between the pillars and the obligation is because some of these, if you were to mistakenly leave it out, you don't have to go and do it back. You just do two sujood at the end, the sujood as-sahw. Some of it, if you mistakenly leave it out, you have to go back and do it back. You can't just suffice with the two sujood at the end. That's why they separate it. But they are all obligatory in the sense of if you were to deliberately leave it out, your salah is invalid. Your salah is invalid. And we're going to go through them. Then you have the recommendation of the salah, which is the most, right? The recommendation of the salah is the most. And that is those actions, if you were to deliberately leave them out, they are not going to harm your salah because it is recommended, right? Those actions, if you were to deliberately leave them out, it's not going to harm this salah because it is recommended. Now the confusing thing for most people is they don't remember what's recommended and what's pillar and what's not, right? Here we have the list, you can go through them, standing for the obligatory prayer, saying Allahu Akbar, Surah Al-Fatiha, the ruku, rising, right? You can read that clear, easy. But we're not going to go through that like that. You have the books. Those who don't have the book, you can have a copy for free, inshallah. If the sisters need, let us know, inshallah ta'ala. I'm going to give a summary how to remember these easily. Anybody remember that summary? How you remember them easily. Now, from the Allahu Akbar to the Assalamu Alaikum is two things. Three things. Statements, positions, and actions. Right? Statements, positions, and actions. So when you say Allahu Akbar, that's what? Statement. You raise your hand, that's a action. You are standing, that's a position. You go into ruku. The ruku there is another position. You come back from the ruku, it's another position. Right? Now all of the positions of the salah are pillars. All of the positions of the salah are pillars with the exception of the first sitting, right? The first sitting for the first tashahhud. All of the positions of the salah are pillars except for the first sitting, for the first tashahhud. And that is in all the salawat except for fajr. So, standing is a pillar. The ruku is a pillar. The standing after the ruku is a pillar. The sujood is a pillar. The sitting between the two sujood is a pillar. And the sitting at the end of the salah is a pillar. They're all pillars. That's how much we cover there, right? We have 14 pillars. So we cover the standing, we cover the ruku, the standing up after the ruku, the sujood, the sitting between the sujood, right? And then you have the last tashahhud. That's 6, right? So we have how much more to complete? No, we have 4, the pillars, we're on the pillars. 14, right? 8 more to complete. Now, there are certain actions, the pillars can't happen without them. For example, you're in ruku is a pillar. Standing after the ruku, standing up, the position where you say Rabbana lakal hamd is a pillar. Now you can move between those two without moving. You can reach from the ruku to the standing up without moving. You can't do that, right? So that standing up from the ruku becomes a pillar because you can't do, you understand? You can't do the standing off, the standing position after the ruku without that movement. So that movement became a pillar. So those are with regards to the pillars. Now what you really need to remember is the positions, right? Because the movements are automatic, right? The movements are automatic. But what you need to remember is the positions. And as we said, all the positions except for the first sitting, right? Except for the first sitting. Because you have the sitting and then you have the tashahhud during the sitting, right? Both of them is separate. So that's with regards to the pillars. So action like the raising of the hand is not a pillar. All of the actions really, they are, what you call it? They are recommendation. Right now, the positions generally, they can literally fall into actions. Right? A ruku is an action, sujood is an action, but understand the technical terminology that we're using. Right? So all of the actions, meaning not the positions, they are recommendation, except for those that you don't have any choice to do, which is going to be clear. You don't have to hurt your head to remember them. Then statements. Now, the statement to enter the salah and the statement to leave the salah. And that's easy to remember, because how else are you going to enter the salah? And how else are you going to leave the salah without Allahu Akbar to enter and without the Allahu Akbar, the Salamu Alaikum to leave? Because remember, pillar, like the pillars of Islam, the main part of the salah, you can't, what do you call it? Pray without it, period. Whether you forget it during the salah or you didn't forget it mistakenly or not, you have to make sure that you come with them. So the The takbir to enter, the supplication to enter and the supplication to leave. Now linked to those two, the main supplication next to it. So the main supplication after you enter the salah is the Fatiha. And the main supplication before you leave the salah is At-Tahiyatu Lillah. And those two are also pillars. So we have 4 supplication. Right? So now, we have, remember, we count 6 positions plus 4, 12. 2 more. Those 2 more are the movements. 6 and 4, 10. So we have 4 more. Right? So we didn't count the standing. Did we count the standing? We didn't count the standing. Right? The standing, the first position. We didn't count the first position. So we have number 1, first position. Number 4, ruku. Number 5, before 5. Number 6, right? Then you have number 7. Then you have number 9. Then you have the sitting for the last tashahhud. Right? The sitting for the last tashahhud. That's 6. So we were right. That's 6. Then you have the main supplication to enter the salah, the main supplication to leave the salah. Right? Then you have the main supplication after you enter the salah, which is Fatiha, and the main supplication before you leave the salah, which is the Tahiyat. So there we are 10. So we 4 now. 4 remaining. Now, let me start with the obvious one. Now, number 13, performing each position in order. Right? So that's 11. Now, that's an obvious one. Right? Nobody really thinks about that. And nobody really, makes that mistake. Right? Nobody, they'll go and they enter Allahu Akbar and then they go straight to Ruku and then Sami Allahu liman hamida and then read Fatiha. Right? That's mixing up the order. Right? The order is obvious. So that's why you don't really have to try remember that. Then you have tranquility in all of the positions. That is what a lot of people don't know. Right? The Russian, as soon as they touch ruku, Subhan Rabbi al-Azim, straight up, sometimes they are not tranquil. Now, what's the definition of tranquility? All of your bones stop moving, and then you move to the next position. So if your bones didn't stop moving, as soon as you move again, there is no rest of your limbs and your joints. There is no tranquility in the salah. Which is enough time to say 1 Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, right? Because that's the least you need to say in the positions. Now the tranquility of the salah, we didn't go through the evidence for all of these things because the nature of the class. We're just going through what we got to do. But for this one, the famous hadith of the Bedouin who came and prayed, and the Prophet ﷺ sent him back and said, you didn't pray, repeat your salah. And he went back and prayed, and the Prophet ﷺ sent him back 3 times. And then he said, to teach me that this is the best that I know to pray. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he tell him to make ruku hatta tatma'inna raki'an, until you are tranquil in your ruku. Everything remains still, right? Itmi'nan has the meaning of sukoon, right? Of stillness. That is one of the meaning. Everything got to remain still. So if nothing remains still, you're not tranquil. And the Prophet ﷺ tell him to repeat the salah. If the salah was valid without tranquility, there wouldn't be any need for him to repeat. The Prophet ﷺ would just teach him what was better to do. Right? What was better to do. So that's with regards to tranquility. Now remember we mentioned that the movement that is a must, you must do this movement in order to go to the next position. That is going to cover in number 5, right? The rising from the ruku. Because you can't rise from the ruku to reach the standing position after the ruku without rising, right? So that one, you don't really need to to remember it on your checklist if it's difficult to remember, right? Because you're obviously gonna rise from your ruku in order to stand after your ruku. But there's a benefit in knowing that it's a pillar. And then you have the rising from the rising from number 8, the rising from the prostration, right? The rising from the prostration. So that's the 14th. Right? Now the rising from the tashahhud to the standing is not from amongst the pillars. It's not from amongst the pillars. Now there's a benefit in knowing that rising action is a pillar. What's the benefit? If you forget a wajib of the salah, right? Or you forget a mustahab of the salah, something that is recommended, and you reach a position that is of a higher importance, you can't go back. So remember, the rising from the ruku is a pillar. Subhana Rabbiyal Azim in the ruku is a wajib. Right? Is a wajib, as you see, the 8 wajibat. Now remember, we say the difference between the pillars and the wajibat, or the obligation, the arkan and the wajibat, is that the arkan, if you forget it, you have to go back. The wajibat, if you forget it, you don't go back. You continue your salah and just do 2 sujood as-sahw at the end. But when is it you don't go back? You don't go back if you reach the next pillar. So now let's say you go to ruku, something distract you didn't say Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, and then you rise, you say Sami Allahu liman hamida, or you just rise without saying Sami Allahu liman hamida. Now once you start to rise, you enter into a pillar, you can't go back. Right? Once you start to rise, you enter into a pillar, so you can't go back. Understand? Compared to the rising from the tashahhud. Remember, when you're rising from the first tashahhud, you're rising from a what? Remember, the first tashahhud is not a pillar. So you're not rising from a pillar. Right? Now that movement, where is the pillar? The pillar is the standing, right? All the way up. So now if you rise slightly and you remember that you didn't do the tashahhud, you can go wrong back. But if you reach up, you can't go wrong back. And if you start Fatiha, definitely you can't go wrong back. Right? We're going to take some examples at the end, but just get the theory. So the arkan, let me review the arkan, because we added a host of things in between. Right? So the pillars of the salah. Pillars meaning, if you leave it out mistakenly, you forget to do it, you have to go back and do it whenever you remember. And if you complete the salah, you give salam, then you realize you got to repeat the entire salah. Once you're still in the time of the salah, and you're sure, right? If you recalling something happened 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, you don't pay attention to it. That's your opening door of wiswas, right? And if you complete the salah, and when you finish, it's a benefit, we should have bring this at the end, but it's not in the book, but I'm going to mention it before I forget it. If you complete your salah, rather if you complete any act of worship, and you complete it, during the performance of the act of worship, you had no doubt, you had no issues, no thought. When you complete it, it's completed, then a doubt came to you, did you do this or didn't do this? You don't pay attention to that doubt. Right? And this is an important principle to make your life easy. Right? You're making ghusl, you have to do ghusl. And then, once you finish, you're drying your skin. And then, did I wash my mouth? Did I wash my nose? Don't pay attention. Just keep. Now, in this, whilst you're doing the ghusl, yeah, you wash your mouth and wash your nose if you doubt whether or not, right? So similarly now with the salah, you finish, you give salam. Then when you finish, give salam. You know what? Did I do the first tashahhud? Did I read the first tahiyat? You don't pay attention to any of those. In the salah, you have the doubt. That's where you deal with it, right? And there are guidelines. We're gonna come to that, inshallah ta'ala. So let's go over the arkan quickly. Listing. We're not gonna list all 14. We'll list what you need to remember generally, the practical ones that's necessary. All the positions except the first sitting for the first tashahhud. All the positions except the first sitting for the first tashahhud. 4 statements. The 2 most important one in the beginning and the 2 most important one at the end. The 2 important one in the beginning, the statement to enter the salah and the fatiha. And the 2 important one at the end is the statement to leave the salah and the tahiyat, at-tahiyatu lillah, that is before it. Right? So with that, you remember all of the practical pillars that you need to remember, right, in general. And then you have the tranquility. Once you don't rush your salah, you're safe with your tranquility. So that's arkan. Now wajibat. What are the wajibat? Now for the wajibat, we have one position. The one position that we didn't add to the pillars, that position is in the wajibat. The one position, which is the first sitting, and also the tahiyyat that is with it, right? But that is statements. Now, the main statement for all of the positions is a wajib, except if it was a pillar, right? Because each position must have some statement that you're doing. So the main statement for each position is a wajib, right? Unless it already counted in the pillar, right? So each position must have one statement, right? Each position need a dhikr. Remember that. Each position need a dhikr. Now remember we said there's some difference of opinion, but we can't, it's sufficient for us to act upon one. It's not that all of these that I choose here, right? Like I said, is based on what our scholars, they have seen to be the most correct. And I went through all of the evidence for all of them. So if you're in doubt, clear evidence for each one of them, right? That class is what we did in Manhaj al-Salikin. Now we're going to repeat, inshallah ta'ala, sometime. So that's the wajibat. So let's go through the salah, right? Or before that. Now, let's give an example if you leave off the wajib and if you leave off the pillar, the arkan. Fatiha is a pillar. Now you say Allahu Akbar, Subhanakallahumma, and then you read Qul huwa Allahu ahad. And then you go to ruku. Allahu Akbar, Subhana Rabbi al-Azim. You realize you didn't read Fatiha. You leave the ruku and go up back. Now the next rak'ah, you realize you didn't read Fatiha in the previous rak'ah. There's no way to go back, right? The first rak'ah, the whole rak'ah is void. So you have to pray an extra rak'ah. Complete extra rak'ah. That's the pillar, right? Now the wajib. The first wajib is the Subhana Rabbi al-Azim. So you pray, you go to ruku, Allahu Akbar. Instead of saying Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, you say Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, right? Or you say Rabbi firli, right? Now you didn't say the Subhana Rabbi al-Azim. You forgot the wajib. Now you reach Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana lakal hamd, then you realize you read the wrong thing or you didn't say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim. You don't go back. You just continue your salah. At the end, you do 2 extra sujood at the end of the salah. Now what if you say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim and also you say Subhana Rabbi al-A'la and you say Rabbi Gfirli? There's nothing you need to do, right? Because they're all dhikr. Right? The Rabbi Gfirli can be recommended in the ruku. right? It's better to say the dua that was mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ, but generally it's recommended to seek forgiveness in the ruku. But that's a recommendation. And a recommendation is not sufficient for an obligation, right? So if you busy the place with a recommendation and you didn't do the obligation, you still have to rectify it. You still have to rectify the salah. Right? So that's what you do. The difference between the ruku and the difference between dealing with mistakenly forgetting a arkan or mistakenly forgetting a wajib. But if you deliberately leave them out, your salah is invalid and you are sinful, because that is deliberately going against the commandment of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's not imaginable unless it's a case of extreme ignorance from an individual, right? But it's not imaginable that someone will know that you have to read this and then leave it out. So we said, so let's go through this salah. So we say Allahu Akbar. First we got to stand, pillar, right? Standing is a pillar. Deliberately leaving it out without a reason, your salah is invalid. So those who pray in chairs and sit praying, you got to make sure that it's a legitimate reason, right? It got to be a legitimate reason why you are standing. If you can't sit but you can stand, you have to stand. Meaning you can't go down for sujood. So you need a chair for your sujood and ruku, but you still got to stand for the qiyam, for the standing position, for the Fatiha and so. So you have the standing, then you say Allahu Akbar. And well, after you say Allahu Akbar, that's pillar. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika wa tabaraka asmuka, right? The thana or the dua al-istiftahi. That's what? It's not mentioned in any of these two categories. It's recommended, right? That's recommended. If you leave it out deliberately or forgetfully, your salah is valid. That's recommended. Then Fatiha, pillar. The surah after the Fatiha, recommended, right? It's not in, because each position need one supplication. The one supplication for this position is the Fatiha and it's a pillar. So everything else is recommended. Then you see Allahu Akbar is it's a wajib. We leave out that one. All of them, the adhkar that you say to move between the positions, they are all wajib. Right? So the Allahu Akbar to go to the ruku and the sujood, come from sujood and so on, they're all wajib. Right? And the Sami Allahu liman hamida, that is to move from the ruku to the standing. Right? So all of the adhkar that you say to move from the pillars, from one pillar to the next, they're all wajib. So Sami Allahu liman hamida, right? So before that, Allahu Akbar, Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, wajib. The actual ruku, pillar. Sami Allahu liman hamida, wajib. Now in the sujood, you can say Subhanaka Allahumma Rabbana wa bihamdika Allahumma gfirli. That's recommended. Now if you say Subhanaka Allahumma Rabbana wa bihamdika Allahumma gfirli and then say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, right? You still have to do sujood as-sahu. Even though you mention a dhikr in the position, but you mention a recommended dhikr. You didn't mention the obligatory dhikr. So you at least have to mention the obligatory dhikr. Rabbana lakal hamd, right? That's the dhikr for the standing after the ruku. If you utter it, it's recommended. Hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fi, or any other, it's recommended. And then you have the sujood, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. Right? And you know, in the sujood is recommended to make dua. So if you make dua and you forget to say Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, you still have to do sujood as-sahu, because you busy the position with a recommended act and you didn't make the obligatory act. Rabbi gfirli is a wajib. And then you have the last, the first tahiyat and the first sitting is, both are wajib. Right? So if you miss any of those two, and you reach up back, you continue the salah and do sujood at the end. And then the last sitting is a pillar. The tahiyat is a pillar. And to say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, it's not listed here amongst the pillar nor the wajibat, but the safest thing is to read it. Because there are many scholars who see it to be a wajib. Some even see it to be a pillar. Right? But the majority see it to be a recommendation. Right? That portion. Because you have to send salat and salam on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So when you finish the tahiyyat, you should say at least Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. It's recommended to say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad to the end. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad to the end. That's the recommendation. Right? But those who say it's either a wajib or a arkan or a pillar, what they meant is to send salat on the Prophet. So even if you say sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, you have completed that obligation. So you should at least say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Like that, what you do. Like that, you're freeing yourself from falling into a place where there is difference of opinion. Right? Now, why is it they say that you should at least say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad or sallallahu ala Muhammad? Why they didn't say wasallam? Why they didn't add that part? Why they didn't say that you should that the salam, to give the salat and the salam after the tahiyyat is a recommendation or a obligation or a pillar? Because remember, you send the salat upon him, the salam upon him in the tahiyyat. At-tahiyatu lillah, as-salamu alayka, right? Ayyuhan nabi. So the salam was sent. What is left? The salat, right? What is left is the salat. We can show Harun and Isa out the masjid, right? I'll to them get you straight out. We need security. Oh, the security is here. But he's what do you say? Off duty. Right? So that's why they mentioned the salat. Now the recommendation is to do the Allahumma salli ala Muhammad to the end. And in that there is no salam. Right? So if someone asks, where is the salam? It's already completed in the tahiyyat. And then you have, after that is recommended to seek refuge in Allah from the four things. Right, from the punishment of the fire of hell, the grave, the fitna of life and death, and the fitna of the Dajjal. But you can read any supplication. And then you can make dua for anything that you want, in Arabic or in English, preferably in Arabic, if you can't, in whatever language. Right, for anything, any single thing that you want, you ask for. And then you have the salam, which is a pillar. So that's in brief the salah. Now the sunan of the salah, we didn't list much of it, right? But those are more in numbers than all of the rest. So rising the hand in the first takbir is a sunnah. So if someone was to say Allahu Akbar and just put their hand and you didn't see any movement, right? The salah is valid. Right? If someone, let's say for some reason they had to come out of their salah, right? Meaning with the intention. So they enter the salah and their hand is on their chest, right? By chest, so you mean near to the chest, right? As we mentioned in the narration of Tirmidhi, it's over the navel, under the navel, right? And because it's in that position, that when the scholars say the chest, as Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he mentioned what is meant is near to the chest. Where is the chest? The chest is here. Right? That, according to many of the scholars, no one ever said that this is the position. This is chest, all the way to the top. That is your chest. Right? But if you really check, even those who say that you put it on the chest itself, they don't really put it on the chest. They're putting it over the navel. Because your chest is that bone there. Right? So let's say you put your hand on your chest and you realize you made intention for the wrong salah. The imam, you came in for it's supposed to be asr, but you made intention for dhuhr, thinking it's dhuhr. Maybe you took a nap or something. So you say Allahu Akbar in the salah. So you don't want anyone see that you repeating your Allahu Akbar. So you keep your hand there, right? You came out of the salah with your intention, and then you say slightly Allahu Akbar. Right? The salah is valid. Right? Because that raising of the hand is a sunnah. The opening dua, the reading of surah after al-Fatiha, making dua in sujood, saying the tasbih of the ruku and sujood 3 times. Saying it 1 time is wajib. Saying it multiple times is sunnah. Right? And supplicating before the salam. All of those are sunnah. Right? Other sunnah, the moving of the head for the salam is sunnah. So if someone was to just say assalamu alaikum, right? The salah is valid, even if they didn't move their head. Placing the hand on the chest, right? Over the navel, below the navel, all of those are sunnah, right? So those are the sunnah of the salah. So everything apart from what we mentioned before, the 22 actions or positions, the 14 plus the 8, they are all sunnah of the salah. Now, that chapter normally lead into sujood as-sahw, right? So now if you leave off a rukn mistakenly, you have to go back to it, complete it, and then at the end you do sujood as-sahw before or after the salam. Now, if you do it after the salam, you say assalamu alaikum, you make 2 sujood as regular, you have to repeat the salam. Right? You have to say back assalamu alaikum and assalamu alaikum. So you're going to have 4 salam in your salah if you do the sujood as-sahw after the first 2 original. Or you can do it before the first 2, before the salam, the actual salam of the salah, and you're going to have the regular 2 salam. So before you say salam, you say Allahu Akbar, make 2 sujood, and then you say the salam. But the very last thing of the salah has to be the salam. And there are times when it's recommended to do it before the sujood, and there's time when it's recommended to do it before the salam, and when it's recommended to do it after the salam. But anytime you do it, it's sufficient. Right? We didn't mention those times because, as we mentioned, the book nature of it is being brief. We're going to go through the other details of the sujood as-sahw, if a person is in doubt and so on in the following class, right? Because this you need a lot of thinking, and you need a lot of thinking and focus to know the wajibat and the arkan, to grasp it properly. So you don't want to pressure the focus too much, and it's now Maghrib is almost 10 o'clock. So most people is going into sleep mode. So we're going to leave that to the end, and remind me to talk about wiswas with sujood as-sahw that afflicts many people, right? More than you even imagine, right? The wiswas regarding the sujood as-sahw. Remind me to cover that if it happened that I forgot. But inshallah, we're going to cover this, what remain here, along with the wiswas of the sujood as-sahw. So with that we officially end. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.